Ms. Van Duyne, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Medicare Advantage program provides millions of seniors with greater choices, added benefits, and coordinated care. Yet, it's also important to recognize that both its value and the areas where reform is needed. With that growth comes the responsibility to ensure the program is working as intended for both patients and for providers. That includes addressing delays caused by prior authorization and reducing the regulatory burden on those delivering care. I was glad to support Mr. Kelly's Improving Seniors' Timely Access to Care Act of 2025, a common-sense bipartisan effort to modernize the prior authorization process. This bill cuts through red tape, streamlines approvals, and ensures that providers can stay focused on what truly matters, which is caring for their patients. Unfortunately, some providers have been forced to take to social media to share the real-world consequences of our broken system, including heartbreaking stories of patients who have been lying on the table waiting for authorization. And it's not just the patients and the providers, but it's also the families who are left bearing the emotional and the logistical burden of these delays. And that's especially true at the end of life, which is why we should be cautious about the charges to end-of-life care, ensuring that we don't add more red tape or uncertainty for families already facing incredibly difficult moments. And Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following article by Hospice News titled Timely Access to Hospice Care, a National Imperative.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Maroney, when a patient suffers a major stroke or a traumatic brain injury, getting the right care at the right time is critical, and too often patient care is delayed due to prior authorization processes, and the patient sits for days in a hospital instead of following a doctor's recommendation to transfer to a specialized setting. In your opinion, is this the best way to care for patients in recovery?
Absolutely not. In the sense of if they're being delayed, if a physician is, how should I say this? If the physician is directing care, then that patient should absolutely receive that care. I actually don't see that happen, specifically where there's a delay in care when somebody's sitting in a hospital, et cetera. It's usually on continuity of care or transition of care or post-care. So when they're being released to the hospital, we're very proactive on trying to make sure what's their plan. Do they live alone? Do they need to be in a skilled nursing facility? And is that skilled nursing facility at a high rate, like when it comes to star ratings or quality type measures? And then at that point, when they're getting in the home, do they have food? Do they have other things that are accessible and available to them? That also starts in that process, and I know I've talked about the prior auth for us being less than 2%. We look at that continuity of care end to end, all the way from the pre-service all the way to the post-service when it comes to actual care, so that they are having mobility and independence when they're outside of a hospital setting.
So are you aware of any timelines that Medicare Advantage plans must follow regarding how quickly they must approve prior authorization decisions?
I do read about it, and I see it, and I hear it in the environment. We'll hear this from other organizations about the delay specifically. That just is not an experience with our company as a result of it.
All right, Dr. Miller, I appreciate Imogene Bassett, right? In Cooperstown. My dad did his internship and his residency. We lived in Cooperstown. Unless you've suffered through some of their winters and gotten the benefit of their summers, it's a beautiful place. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Brought back fond memories. I want to follow up on my previous question as a practicing hospitalist. When a patient's care is delayed due to prior authorization processes, is it fair to say that it's not just the patient who is impacted, but it's also another patient who may need hospital care and can't access it?
Yeah, and it also impacts the doctor too, right? Because you're trying to make an excuse for why someone hasn't gone to a skilled nursing facility or an inpatient rehabilitation facility, and they're sitting there in the hospital, and you're saying, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm waiting for the plan. Now, the flip side of that is, ironically, sometimes that extra day or two in the hospital with physical therapy and occupational therapy might actually get that patient to a better place. So that patient who we needed to send to subacute rehab might actually be able to go home with home physical therapy. So I'd say it's good, but it's also bad.
Okay. Dr. Basil, following up the question that I had asked to Ms. Maroney, have you seen any of those examples where people are waiting
So you brought up the stroke example. That's a great one where we've seen considerable pressure, on stroke patient that has considerable rehab needs and really needs to go to an inpatient rehab level of stay, that it is really difficult to get that approved in MA plans. And most of the time they get downgraded to skilled nursing level of care, which is a step down in intensity from inpatient rehab. And so I'd say that's a pretty consistent theme that we do see, is that type of down regulation of where we can send them versus where the physician thinks is best.
All right, I appreciate that. I've run out of time. Thank you, and I yield back.